For many, many years, global leaders have been coming over here to talk about the high economy, to talk about wealth, and to talk about policy. But over a period of time, there has always been a sense that what they speak about represents only a small part of the world. Every year, Oxfam comes out with the Global Inequality report. It's a stark difference from the wealth which is often associated with Davos, one of the most premier, expensive and exclusive ski resorts anywhere in the world. Amitabh Behar of Oxfam joins us now. He is responsible for the Global Inequality report. Very much a reality check. I think that's what we can call it that.
It is, yeah.
What struck me about the report, and the report of course speaks about the entire world, was the India supplement, where you talk about India being 62nd of 74 in inclusive development. How did you reach that number?
So if you look at our report, it is built on public data, essentially looking at Credit Suisse data and the Forbes list, and then we have worked on the inequality across the world.
Right. And the inequality gap, you say, is increasing in India. And one statistic was that 78% of the population has a net worth of $10,000 less than $10,000, and 1.8% has above 100,000. So describe for us how that stark reality is basically about what India is today.
Well, absolutely. As in, if you look at this data, let me just give you a few data points. In India, 63 billionaires have more wealth than what was the annual budget of Government of India last year. That's the obscene inequality that we see. Let me just add one more. Top 1% of the Indian wealthy actually have 4 times more wealth than the 70% of Indian population.
Right.
And then there is a strong gender dimension. This year, we have highlighted the care economy and the gender dimension.
We'll talk about that in a moment, because I think that's going to be the bulk of what we'll talk about. But just in terms of the location Davos, the fact that it's the ultimate meet and greet destination, and you're talking essentially about poverty and its impact and global inequality. How does your report stand for a stark difference from what Davos is all about?
So you said meet and greed. I heard it as greed. So it certainly is the epicenter of greed.
True.
And I think we need to come here every year to at least remind the billionaires that this obscene inequality is unacceptable. As in, if you just look at the global wealth inequality, we are this year we've come out with a figure that the billionaires actually have more wealth than 4.6 billion people in the world. This is completely unacceptable. And then juxtapose this with the figure that almost 50% of the global population lives with less than $5.5 a day, which is the living wage. And I think what's very critical, and in the Indian context, I hope we talk about it, that extreme poverty for the first time in decades is again increasing now. You're seeing that happen in the LAC region, the Latin America and the Caribbean. You're seeing that in sub-Saharan Africa. And unfortunately also in India, where we have seen the NSO data telling us that the rural poverty is actually going up. So that's the real story. As in, the wealthy lifestyle and the epicenter of greed, giving me that phrase, thank you for that. We need to really juxtapose these two.
We'll talk about poverty in a moment, but in India, 416,000 new dollar millionaires in the last 1 year. We talk about our GDP being stifled at the moment, India not growing, and yet the inequality is growing, and the number of millionaires is huge. The total wealth has increased by 625 billion last year. The top 1% increased by 46%. So the rich essentially keep getting richer, right? That's your point.
Absolutely. As in, this system is rigged. It's completely rigged in favor of the rich. So this is a system which is built on the exploitation of common, ordinary people. This is a system which is built on the exploitation of women and girls. So yes, the rich are getting richer and the poor continue to be poor.
The top 10% holds 74.3% of India's total national wealth. The top, in fact, it's worse than that, because the top 1% holds 42.5% of the national wealth.
As I said, 1% has 4 times wealth than the 70% of the Indian population.
The one statistic which I found the most stark and most frightening and the saddest was when you wrote it would take a female domestic worker 22,277 years to earn what the CEO of India's top tech company makes in 1 year.
Exactly. Isn't it heartbreaking?
Yeah.
That's really the story. As in, let me just, I'm sure we encounter this on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But let me give you a specific case from Madhubani.
Yeah.
Her name is Buchu Devi. She literally wakes up at 3 a.m. She has a 3-kilometer walk to get water for her. Then she goes and gets fodder, fuel for her house, sends children to school, does cleaning, cooking. Then she goes to a construction site where she's anyways underpaid, comes back and takes care of the family, and she works 18 hours a day. And when we spoke to her, she said in Hindi, "Marne ki bhi fursat nahi hai." She really doesn't have time to die. That's what she was saying. So that's the level of inequality and the gender dimension we look at.
Yeah.
So I was talking of the system being rigged in favor of the super rich and the elites. It's also rigged in favor of men. I think that's the real highlight for us this year.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But what I found is, and you were talking about the global gender gap, where India ranked, and this is a good starting point, India ranked 112 out of 153. So even though we are fairly high on political empowerment for women, 18 out of all of these countries, in other key areas, we are awful, and there's no other word for it.
Absolutely. As in, whether you look at violence against women, you look at maternal mortality. So in all the indicators, we are doing extremely poorly. And that's something that we need to underscore again and again.
Economic participation, let's talk about this. India, 149th out of 153 nations. Why is this the case that, and you've also had another statistic that even women with bachelor's degrees are often not finding a meaningful role in the workplace. Why is India so poor in economic participation for women?
So, as we look at the post-globalization era, we are looking at an era where you're seeing informalization of the labor. And that's where women are particularly getting pushed out. And added to this informalization that's happening in the formal economic system, you're also looking at the care economy burden. And I must again emphasize that until and unless governments start investing in public health, public education, which are essentially the public services, childcare, women will be pushed out again and again. And there's several examples of that. And therefore, it becomes very, very critical to also start looking at where are we making our investments. So if you really look at Government of India's investments, say, in education and health, for decades we've been saying it should be 3 and 6%. Every successive government talks of it, but the actual investments are way below that. And that's something, again, the burnt of that is borne by the women.
The decline in workforce participation for rural women has gone down from 35.8 to 24.6%. Again, is there a specific reason why this has happened? And is there a difference between urban women and employment and women in the rural sector?
I would say that it's declining across, but the rural areas and agriculture has anyways been in significant distress. So that's one of the causes, yes.
All right, let's go through a couple of other points. I'm just gonna keep pulling through my notes over here as I flip through with my Let's talk about the unpaid care work area, which reinforces gender inequality in the country. How has this been a central part of what you have looked at? The essential disparity which lies over there and the inequality as far as gender and work is concerned.
Yeah, so I think it's important to first talk about what is the unpaid care work, what is the care economy. It's very, very critical to talk about it. It's essentially women who take care of children, do a lot of time in cleaning, cooking, getting fuel to their households, taking care of the elderly, the sick, and this pushes them away from economic activities. So they're not able to go and get formal work. And if you calculate this, and ILO has done studies, time use surveys, which tells us that the contribution of unpaid care work of women in India would be almost 19 lakh crores, which is 20 times the education budget of Government of India. Right. So that's the amount that we're looking at. I think if we don't start addressing it, we'll neither be able to achieve gender parity, nor get any kind of a equal system.
And this is a problem, right? Because there is no way of actually measuring this contribution statistically, because statistically it doesn't exist. And yet, in this particular sector, they play such a critical role. So
I would say that, as ILO and a lot of feminist economists have actually worked on it, and I would say that there are ways of measuring it. Time use surveys is one of those ways of doing it. But it's important that this is recognized as work. So it's a fundamental shift of the narrative that needs to be made. And that's happened in many places. So in a country like Uruguay, they have a Care Act now, in which the caregiver is recognized, and also people have the right to get care. So I think it's a fundamental narrative shift where we start recognizing the unpaid care work.
Last question to you. What is the basic message of the Global Inequality Report this year? What is fundamentally new and different?
So the basic message is we need to end the billionaire boom. This is not going to work. As in, look at around the country, around the world. At least in 30 countries at the moment, people are protesting. And what are they protesting against? You just go across one protest to another, and they're saying that we don't need billionaires anymore. So that's really the message that's coming out. And I think we need to take this call very, very seriously. Governments need to hear that. And the second message for us is, while we listen to this call, we also need to look at the gender dimension. We need to address the unpaid care work of women and girls.
Amitabh, it's been wonderful speaking to you. Thanks very much indeed. Well, there you have it. It's a reality check. It's a report which talks about greed, in a sense, is what Amitabh described it as, and a stark contrast to what we see here in Davos, world leaders, business leaders assembling, talking about wealth. But ultimately, it's also about inequality, and how you actually measure that inequality is often very challenging. But that's what this report seeks to do.